Welcome to the channel. Simple, clear, and focused on what matters. Here, every video is made with purpose. If that's what you're looking for, go ahead and subscribe. My daughter-in-law slid the papers across the kitchen table the way someone slides a bill at a restaurant. Not with cruelty, exactly. With the casual certainty of a person who has already decided the outcome and is simply waiting for the formality to catch up. She did not look at me when she did it. She looked at her nails. My son stood near the window. He had his back to me, which told me everything I needed to know about how prepared he was to look me in the eye. I picked up the papers. I read the first line. Then I set them back down. I did not say anything. I have learned, in 63 years on this earth, that silence is not the same as surrender. Most people cannot tell the difference. That has always worked in my favor. I want to start a little earlier than that afternoon. I want to start at the beginning, so you understand what kind of woman I am and what kind of house we are talking about. My husband and I bought this house 31 years ago. It was a Wednesday in October, and the leaves on the maple in the front yard had gone the color of an old brick. I remember because I cried in the car before we went inside. Not from happiness, though there was plenty of that. From something harder to name. Relief, maybe. The kind that comes after years of working 2 jobs and eating cereal for dinner and telling yourself it would be worth it someday. That day, it was worth it. We raised our son in that house. We painted every room ourselves. My husband built the shelves in the hallway with wood he bought from a man 2 towns over. I planted the rose bushes along the side fence in the spring of 2003, and they have come back every year since. That house was not just a house. It was the physical proof of a life my husband and I had built together from almost nothing. My husband passed 4 years ago. Heart attack, sudden, a Tuesday morning while he was making coffee. I will not spend much time there. The grief is mine, and I keep it close. What I will tell you is that after he was gone, I stayed in that house. Some people told me I should sell, that it was too big for one person, that I would rattle around in it. I told them I was perfectly comfortable rattling. My son moved back home 8 months after my husband passed. He had lost his job, he said. The company downsized. It happened to a lot of people. I told him, of course, come home, take your time, get back on your feet. I meant it. That house had 4 bedrooms and I was one person. There was room. He did not come alone. I had met my daughter-in-law twice before she moved into my home. Once at a restaurant where she spent most of the evening on her phone, and once at a family gathering where she corrected me, in front of other people, about the way I made sweet tea. She said she preferred it unsweetened. I smiled and said that was fine and brought her a glass of water. I notice things. I always notice things. I just do not always speak about what I notice. The first few months were manageable. My son helped with yard work. My daughter-in-law used the kitchen and left dishes in the sink, but I let it go. I told myself people adjust. I told myself she was in a new place, and new places make people uncomfortable in ways they do not always express gracefully. Then she started rearranging things. It started small. The dish towels. She moved them from the drawer by the stove to a hook by the back door. I moved them back. She moved them again. I let them stay. Then it was the living room furniture. She told me the couch was blocking the natural flow of the room. I did not know my living room had a natural flow, but apparently it did, and apparently it was blocked. The couch moved, then my reading chair, then the small table my husband had refinished the summer before he got sick, the one with the uneven leg he had shimmed with a piece of a matchbook, the one I had never moved because I liked knowing exactly where it was in the dark. I found it in the hallway one morning, just sitting there. She had replaced it with a decorative bench she ordered online. I put the table back. I did not explain why. She looked at me with an expression I recognized from raising a child, the specific look of someone who has decided to let something go for now and revisit it later with more leverage. My son saw none of this, or he chose not to see it. I have thought a long time about which one it was. I think at the beginning he truly did not notice. Later, I believe he noticed and looked away. There is a particular kind of weakness in a good person who has been slowly convinced that the woman he loves is always a little bit right, just enough to justify going along. My daughter-in-law was very good at being a little bit right. She started talking about the house in terms of the future, what it could be, what it would look like with updated fixtures, how the backyard was wasted space. She said this the way people say it about things they have already decided belong to them, with the comfortable authority of ownership. I noticed that too. About 10 months after they moved in, my son came to find me in the garden. I was deadheading the roses. He stood on the back porch for a minute before he spoke, which told me he had rehearsed what he was going to say and was checking it against some internal script. He said that he and my daughter-in-law had been talking. He said they felt the house would work better for everyone if we made it more of a shared arrangement. He said they had found a lawyer who could draw up a family trust. He said it would protect the house. He said my name would still be on it. I kept working on the roses. I asked him what kind of trust. He said a living trust, a joint one, with all 3 of our names. I asked what that meant for the house if something happened to me. He hesitated, just for a second, but I have known that hesitation my entire life. I felt it before he spoke it. He said it would pass to him and to her, which made sense, he said, because who else would it go to? I did not say anything for a little while. I snipped a dead bloom and dropped it in the bucket. I asked if he needed an answer right now. He said no. He said, "Take your time, Mom." I could hear the relief in his voice that I had not said no immediately. He thought that meant yes was coming. I went inside. I made tea. I sat at my kitchen table, at the table my husband and I had eaten 30 years of breakfast at, under the light fixture I had picked out from a catalog in 1999, in the house I had cried in the car about on a Wednesday in October, and I thought very carefully. I was not surprised. I want you to understand that. I was not surprised, and I was not angry yet. I was sad, the way you are sad when something you suspected becomes something you know. There is a different weight to knowing. What I did next, I did quietly. I did not tell my son. I did not tell my daughter-in-law. I called an attorney. Not the one they had found. My own. A woman I had been referred to by a friend from church, someone who handled estate planning and knew exactly what a joint living trust meant and what it did not mean, and what a person my age, with a paid-off house and a son who had started using phrases like what works for everyone needed to understand about her options. That conversation lasted 2 hours. I paid attention. I want to tell you about a Tuesday evening 3 months after that conversation, because that is when the papers came across the kitchen table. My daughter-in-law had made dinner. This was unusual. She did not often cook. She had made pasta, something with jarred sauce, and she had set the table with the cloth napkins I kept in the sideboard for holidays. I noticed the cloth napkins. I noticed that my son had dressed in a nicer shirt than he normally wore at home. I noticed the candles. I sat down and I ate and I waited, because I knew what cloth napkins in the middle of a Tuesday meant. After dinner, after my son cleared the plates in a performance of helpfulness that I recognized as a form of apology delivered in advance, my daughter-in-law brought out a folder. She said they had been patient. She said she and my son had been living here for almost a year, and they had given me plenty of time to think. She said the trust was a good thing for the whole family, and she did not understand why I was making it complicated. She said, And I remember this exactly because I wrote it down later. She said that at my age, it was actually irresponsible not to have a plan. At my age. I am 63 years old. I ran the cardiac unit of a regional hospital for 11 years. I organized a fundraiser that built a community garden 2 blocks from the high school. I drove my husband to every single chemotherapy appointment his mother ever had, and I held her hand while she slept in the chair, and I brought food to their house for 4 months without being asked and without being thanked. I have been making plans since before my daughter-in-law was born. I picked up the papers, I read them, then I set them down. My son finally turned from the window. He asked what I thought. I said I would need a few days. My daughter-in-law said they had already given me months. She said at some point a decision needed to be made, and if I was not willing to make it, then perhaps I needed to think about whether this living arrangement still made sense. She said that, in my house, at my table, with my cloth napkins folded in her lap. My son said her name, quietly, the way you say someone's name when you want them to soften something they have already said too hard. She looked at him. Something passed between them. He turned back to me. He said they loved me. He said this was not about love, it was about practicality. He said the house was a lot to manage, and they could help manage it, but they needed to know it was secure. He said if I was not comfortable with the trust, then maybe we needed to talk about other arrangements. I asked what other arrangements meant. He could not say it directly. He moved around it the way you move around a word you know but cannot bring yourself to use. He said something about everyone needing their own space, about fresh starts, about how it might be healthier. My daughter-in-law said it directly. She said there was a very nice senior community 20 minutes away, and she had already looked into it, and the apartments were actually quite lovely, 63 years old. I looked at my son. He was looking at the table. I said I understood. I said I would think about it. I said good night. I went to my room, and I closed the door. And I sat on the edge of the bed my husband and I had shared for 27 years, and I allowed myself exactly 1 hour to feel everything I was feeling. Grief and fury, and something underneath both of those that was colder and quieter and more useful. Then I picked up the phone and called my attorney. I want to tell you something about the weeks that followed, because they are important. I did not argue with my daughter-in-law. I did not make speeches. I did not call relatives to complain or create scenes at the dinner table. I went about my days. I tended my roses. I watched my son watching me, with the guilty discomfort of a man waiting for a conversation that does not come. I watched my daughter-in-law move through my house with the increasing confidence of a person who has already decided a thing is settled. She repainted the guest bathroom. She did not ask me. She chose a color called muted sage, which is the color of something that has been left out too long. She told me it would brighten the space. I said, and kept walking. She told her friend on the phone, I was not supposed to hear, that her mother-in-law was finally coming around, that things were going to be sorted out soon, that the old woman just needed time to accept reality. I kept walking. What I was doing, during those weeks, was not accepting reality. What I was doing was finishing a process I had started 4 months earlier in an attorney's office with a woman who explained to me very clearly and very patiently what my options were, and what the law said, and what a person in my position could do if she was careful and deliberate, and did not tip her hand. My husband had always said I was the most patient person he had ever met. He meant it as a compliment. I took it as one. Patience is not passivity. Patience is the willingness to wait for exactly the right moment and to do exactly the right thing at exactly the right time. My daughter-in-law had spent nearly a year assuming that my quietness meant I had nothing to say. She was making the most expensive mistake of her life. My attorney called me on a Thursday afternoon. She said everything was in order. She said I should come in and sign the final documents. I drove there on a Friday morning. I wore my good coat. I signed my name in 4 places. I thanked her. I drove home and made myself lunch and sat at my kitchen table and felt something settle in my chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. That was the week I started making other arrangements, my own arrangements. I called my sister in Asheville. She has a 2nd bedroom she has been asking me to use for years, ever since her husband passed and the house got quiet. I told her I was thinking of visiting for a while. She said, "How long is a while?" I said I was not sure. She said, "Come whenever you want. You know where the key is." And she sounded so genuinely happy that I held the phone after she hung up and stood there in the kitchen for a minute. I did not tell my son I was going. Not directly. I left a note on the kitchen table, under the ceramic rooster I have kept on the counter since 1998. I said I was going to visit my sister. I said I hoped they would be comfortable. I said the refrigerator filter needed replacing and the date was written on a piece of tape inside the cabinet door above the dishwasher. I said I loved my son. I signed my name. I packed 2 bags. I took the box of photographs from the top shelf of my closet. I took the quilt my mother made. I took the small clay dish my son made for me in 4th grade, the one glazed an uncertain shade of green that he told me was supposed to be blue. I left the furniture. I left the cloth napkins. I left the bench in the hallway. I did leave one more thing. On the kitchen counter, next to the note, I left a sealed envelope addressed to my son, not to both of them, to my son. I asked him, in that letter, to have his own attorney read the deed on the house before he made any further plans. I drove to Asheville on a Saturday morning in early November. The leaves were down, and the sky was the flat gray of approaching winter. I stopped once for coffee and stood outside the car in a rest stop parking lot and breathed the cold air and felt, for the first time in almost a year, like I was standing in my own life. My sister made pot roast the first night. We sat at her kitchen table until almost 11 o'clock, talking about our mother and things we had not thought about in years. I slept 9 hours and woke up to the sound of her radio and the smell of coffee and sunlight coming through curtains she has had since 1987. It was the best morning I had had in a very long time. My son called 4 days later. I almost did not pick up, but I raised him, and I know the difference between the silences in the way someone lets a phone ring. He let it ring a long time. "That told me something," I answered. He did not say hello exactly. He said "Mom," in the way he used to say it when he was small and had done something he was not proud of and had not yet figured out how to begin the conversation. I said yes. He said he had talked to a lawyer. He said he had read the documents. He said his voice went somewhere small and unfamiliar. He said, "Mom, the house is already in a trust." I said, "Yes, it is," he said. "When?" I said I had taken care of it some months ago. He was quiet for a little while. I could hear him breathing. I thought about all the times I had listened to him breathe. When he was a baby, and I checked on him 3 times a night and stood in the doorway and waited to hear that small rise and fall. All the years you spend keeping someone alive and safe, and they become a person who sits at your table and does not look at you while your house gets rearranged around you. I did not say that. I let him have his silence. He asked what the trust meant. For him, for his plans, I said it meant the house was protected. I said I had set up what is called an irrevocable trust with specific terms. I said the details were in the documents, and his lawyer could explain them, but the short version was that the house could not be signed over, could not be transferred, could not be absorbed into any joint arrangement without conditions that neither he nor anyone else could simply decide over dinner. He said he did not understand why I had done it this way, why I had not just talked to him. I said I had tried to talk to him, I said I had been standing in the garden, and he had come to me with a rehearsed speech about something that had already been decided without me, and I had asked questions, and the answers told me everything I needed to know about what talking would accomplish. He said that was not fair. I said perhaps not. But fair had not been the operating principle in my home for quite some time. He was quiet again. Longer this time. He said her name. He said he thought she had just been trying to help. He said she had good intentions. I said I was sure she believed that. I said I wanted to tell him something, and I needed him to listen without interrupting. He said okay. I said I loved him. I said that was not a small thing or a polite thing. It was the truest thing I knew. I said I had loved him since before he had a name, since he was a idea and a hope and a Tuesday in October. I said I had built a life around making sure he had something solid to stand on, the same way my husband had, the same way his grandparents had before us, each generation handing something forward to the next. I said love does not ask you to hand it over. Love does not slide papers across a table and talk about senior communities at 63. Love does not stand by a window with its back to you. I said I needed him to understand the difference between being loved and being managed. And I needed him to understand that I had always known the difference, even when I was quiet about it. He did not say anything for a long time. Then he said he was sorry. Just those words. I am sorry, Mom. I sat with that for a moment. I said I knew. I said I was staying in Asheville for a while. I said I was not disappearing. I said I would answer when he called. I said when he was ready to have a real conversation, one without rehearsed speeches and folded napkins and discussions about what works for everyone, I would be here. He said, okay. I said, take care of my rose bushes, the ones along the side fence. They need cutting back before the first hard frost, or they will struggle in the spring. He said he would. I said goodbye. My attorney sent me a message 2 weeks later. She said the documents my son's lawyer had requested had been delivered. She said everything was exactly as we had arranged. She said, and she used these exact words. She said she hoped I was resting. I wrote back and said I was doing more than resting. I said I was remembering how to live in my own life. That is not a small thing. After a year of watching your own home rearrange itself around you, after months of cloth napkins and repainted bathrooms and papers slid across tables and suggestions about senior communities, after all of it, to sit in a kitchen that smells like pot roast and coffee, to sleep 9 hours and wake up to the radio that is not a small thing. I thought about my husband a lot in those early weeks in Asheville. I thought about the way he used to sit in the chair by the window in the evenings with a book he was not really reading, just present, just there, that particular steadiness of him. I thought about what he would have said if he had been there that Tuesday night. I think he would have said nothing at first. He was like me in that way. He would have watched. He would have taken it in. And then, quietly, without announcement or drama, he would have done exactly what needed to be done. I believe he would have been proud of me. I do not tell this story because I am angry. The anger came, and it served its purpose, and I let it go. I tell it because I know there are women out there sitting at their own kitchen tables, in their own houses, watching their own things get moved, feeling the walls of their own lives press inward, and they are quiet because they have been taught that quiet means patient, that patient means kind, that kind means accepting whatever is put in front of them. I want those women to understand something. Quiet is not the same as powerless. Watching is not the same as surrendering. The fact that you do not make a scene does not mean you are not paying attention. You are allowed to pay attention. You are allowed to call an attorney. You are allowed to take 2 bags and drive to your sister's house and stand in a rest stop parking lot in November and breathe cold air and feel your own life settle back into place around you. You built something. Nobody gets to slide papers across the table and wait for you to hand it over. My son came to visit in January. He drove up alone. He brought flowers, the grocery store kind in plastic wrap, the kind that mean I did not know what else to bring, but I wanted to bring something. I put them in a vase and made coffee, and we sat at my sister's kitchen table and talked for 3 hours. Properly. No rehearsed speeches, no scripts. He told me things had been difficult at home. I said I imagined they had. He said he had been doing a lot of thinking. I said I was glad. He said some things were going to change. I listened, and I did not fill in the spaces for him the way I used to when he was small and searching for words. I let him find them himself. He asked if I would come home. I said not yet. I said I was not ready yet, and I wanted to be ready before I came back, because I intended to come back to my home, my whole home, and I was not going to come back to something that looked like mine, the Sinstiven, but had been quietly rearranged into something else. He said he understood. I think he did. I think that was the first time in a long time that he really did. He left on a Sunday afternoon. I stood on my sister's porch and watched him back out of the driveway. He waved from the window. I waved back. My sister came to stand beside me. She said, "He looked like his father just then." I said, "I know. He does, sometimes." We stood there until the car was out of sight. The sky had gone pink at the edges. Somewhere down the street, someone had a wood fire going, and the smoke drifted through the cold, and it smelled like every winter I had ever lived through. All of them at once, layered on top of each other like quilts. My sister went inside. I stood there for another minute. The rose bushes would be dormant now, back home, cut back and quiet and waiting. They come back every year. You learn to trust that about things you have tended for a long time. They go still. They look like they are gone. And then the spring arrives, and there they are, stubborn and green and starting over. I went inside. My sister had refilled my coffee. I sat down at the table, and I wrapped both hands around the mug, and I was warm.